Hi, my name's DJ and I'm learning about clustering by experimenting with Raspberry Pis. I've got a series of blog posts here, Brambleweenie Cluster Experiments. The first one explains how I'm starting out with the Raspberry Pi cluster. That's the cluster I have already. This video is to accompany this blog post here, which is really the first step, preparing the operating system image. So you can read this blog post, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform all the steps in this blog post here in the video as well, so you can watch it instead of read it if you want to. So the first thing we need to do is to download the Raspberry Pi OS image. When I first wrote this blog post, the OS was called Raspbian. It's the same thing effectively. So I've already downloaded it. There it is. And the first thing we want to do really is unzip the whole thing, which it only contains one file, a .img file. Once we've unzipped that, we can mount the image file with HDI Util. So we'll say HDI Util mount 2020 05 27 etc. img, and we'll see that this image file actually has two partitions on it. It's got this partition that's been mounted at /volumes boot here on this machine, and it's also got another partition of type Linux, which is effectively the root partition. So if I just have a quick look now, I'll see that down here I've got dev disk for S1, which is this thing up here. It's been mounted at /volumes /boot. So if I have a look at that, list /volumes /boot, I can see the contents of the boot partition. So there we go. So that's so far so good. What we need to do now is add a file to this boot partition so that when the Raspberry Pi with an SD card with this image is booted, it will automatically start OpenSSH, the daemon, so that we can remote log into it without needing to connect a keyboard or a screen. So I'm going to create a file on that boot partition, touch volumes boot SSH. So that's this bit here, and that's effectively it. The reason I'm doing it this way before burning the OS image to the SD card here is because I've got a number of Raspberry Pi computers that I want to use in the cluster. So I only want to do this once. So I want to create a burnable image with this SSH file on it. So now once we've done that, I can actually unmount it with unmount umount volume boot, unmount the actual partition via the mount point. And now what I'll do is I'll create a new zip file, because if you want to use Balena Etcher, which is also described here, it can run straight off a zip file, and that's quite convenient. So I'm going to do that anyway. Zip 2020 armhf ssh.zip, and I'm going to zip in that image file. Okay. So what I'm doing is packaging that back up again, and what we're packaging is this image, disk image with that partition where we've written the SSH file onto the boot partition off. So once that's done, I could then use that zip file with Balena Etcher, which is this sort of graphical program here that allows me to select an image, and you can select a zip file. Then you can select an external drive. I'm going to be using this SD card in a little SD card reader thing here, a USB adapter, which is really convenient. I'm going to stick that in a second. And I could select that drive then, and then flash the image to that drive. Instead, what I want to do is show you how you can do that on the command line, okay? Because the future is terminal, right? So let's have a look now. I'm going to stick this into this USB hub here. And if I say disk util list, we'll see a number of disk image information, disk images and the information for those. And the one we're interested in is this last one here. For some strange reason, I've done this a couple of times before, for some strange reason we're seeing sort of after images, after effects of me doing this a couple of times before. But the one that we're interested in is this 32 gig SD card here. We can sort of tell it's that one there. So it's dev disk 5. Okay, so we can see here that in this example it's dev disk 4. So what we first need to do, because we're going to write the image directly to the raw partition, we need to unmount it. We can unmount it like this as well. We can say sudo disk, if I could type, disk util unmount disk dev disk 5 in this case. And now we're ready to actually use the dd command instead of ballerina etcher to write that image. So we can say sudo dd, and we're going to use the block size of 1 megabyte. The input file is this image file here. rmhf.image, and the output file effectively is the raw version of that particular SD card disk there. So we got the input file here, and we got the output file dev r disk 5 in this case. And just so we don't forget, we'll add that onto the end. We'll just flush the buffers with sync. Access files and removable volume. Yeah, let's do that. This should take a while, so I'll come back in a second when this is done. In the meantime, if you're interested, you can actually interrupt or peek into this DD process. If you hit Control T, you can see where it's got to. Anyway, I'm going to come back when it's done. Okay, that's now complete. So effectively we've written the image to the SD card, and that's all there is to it. We can now eject the SD card. We need to actually eject it. So we need to say sudo disk util eject dev rdisk 5, and now we're done. So we can take this SD card, stick it in a Raspberry Pi, and boot it up and connect to it via SSH. Thanks for watching.